Chapter 2201, Another Story of Hua Xia, 42. Nangong Chuan was handling important matters in the company but suddenly received a phone call from Nangong Yunyi. Without even thinking about it, he scolded Nangong Yunyi. Just as he was going to hang up the phone, Nangong Yunyi's indifferent voice came from the other end. Grandfather asked you to come to the villa. Something happened to Zhao Meishui and her daughter. After Zhao Meishui entered the Nangong family, Nangong Yunyi never called her mother but called her by her name. Nangong Chuan was angry at him for this in the beginning but eventually became accustomed to it. However, when he heard that something happened to Zhao Meishui and her daughter, his anger burned again. Nangong Yunyi, did you do something to Meishui and Len'er? Len'er is your sister, and Meishui is your mother. Why did you pick on them all the time? Can't you just stop hurting them? You are crazy. Nangong Chuan's voice was extremely angry as if it was not his son at the other end of the line but a familiar stranger. The Nangong family's villa. Nangong Yunyi's hand that was holding the phone shook, but then he expressionlessly hung up. He'll be back in a minute, he said, looking up at grandfather Nangong in front of him. As long as Zhao Meishui had any problem, he would hurtle back hurriedly. Sigh. Grandfather Nangong was not deaf, so he heard Nangong Chuan's angry voice and he looked a bit embarrassed. Yunyi, these years, you were really wronged. Nangong Chuan was too biased against Nangong Yunyi and blamed him even without asking what happened. How could a father treat his son like this? Nangong Yunyi didn't speak. He looked at the pale Zhao Meishui and said nonchalantly, it doesn't matter. Anyway, soon Nangong Chuan will know his beloved woman has cuckolded him. Even his favorite daughter was his own. No, Zhao Meishui screamed and burst down on her knees, crying, Father, I know I'm wrong. I really know I'm wrong. Please don't tell Chuan about this. He won't be able to bear it. As his wife, no one knew the man better than she. He loved her and even spoiled her, but he also had his bottom line. If he knew she was cheating on him, then he would never forgive her. It's none of my business here. I'll leave first. The man moved around grandfather Nangong and tried to leave but was stopped by Nangong Yunyi. Since Luo Feng and Yun Xiao didn't want to meddle in the family affairs of the Nangong family, they didn't come to the villa and left after handing the recording pen to them. Therefore, the man, who didn't see those two freaks, immediately kicked at Nangong Yunyi when he saw that Nangong Yunyi dared to stop him. However, just as he kicked out his foot, Nangong Yunyi had held it tightly. Did you cause grandfather's car accident? And did you control a driverless car to hit Luo Feng today? The man's expression changed and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. He hadn't revealed that he had hurt grandfather Nangong, so he wouldn't admit it now. Seeing that the man refused to confess, Nangong Yunyi didn't say anything more. He sneered and took out a recording pen. When he pressed the button, a familiar voice came from the pen, which made the man immediately turn pale. Bitch. The man's expression changed and he punched Zhao Meishui. Did you sell me out? Did you inform the Nangong family people to come here today? Chapter 2202, Another Story of Hua Xia, 43. Zhao Meishui was bleeding profusely from the punch, but she bit her lips tightly and said nothing. At that moment, the door was opened and then Nangong Chuan, carrying a briefcase, quickly walked in. As soon as he saw Zhao Meishui whose face was covered by blood, he flew into a rage and rushed over. Meishui, what's going on? Are you okay? With an aching heart, he looked up at Nangong Yunyi in anger. Nangong Yunyi, I didn't expect you were so daring. How dare you beat up your mom? I am going to call the police to arrest you. From now on, I, Nangong Chuan, don't have a son. When Nangong Chuan said this, no one stopped him but just quietly listened. But grandfather Nangong's face was full of disappointment. He was thoroughly disappointed in his son. If you weren't Nangong's dad, I would have been rude to you. Hong Luan clenched her fists and her eyes were full of killing intent. He got somebody to beat his mom, and you guys want to be nasty to me. Nangong Chuan sneered and helped Zhao Meishui stand up from the ground. He felt Zhao Meishui was trembling. Thinking she was too frightened, he felt his heart ache for her again. Since Meishui married him, she had never enjoyed her life. When they lived with his father, she had to please his father, and these people still came to hassle her, even though they had moved out and lived by themselves. Did they really think he wouldn't get angry? Nangong Chuan, grandfather Nangong sneered, what kind of a father would blame his son without knowing what happened? Why are you so sure it's his fault? Is he really your son? Dad, don't try to defend this little bastard. He broke into my house with his men and seriously injured Mei Shui. I'm not going to let him off. Nangong Chuan rushed to beat Nangong Yunyi, but grandfather Nangong shielded Yunyi with his body. If you want to hit Yunyi, hit me first. At the moment, grandfather Nangong looked so angry and even his clenched fists were trembling slightly. Dad, Nangong Chuan cried incredulously, this bastard has done such a terrible thing. And you still try to protect him? Grandfather Nangong smiled coldly, even if Yunyi beat her, she deserved it. She has cuckolded you many times over the years, and even your beloved daughter is not yours. Now she was having sex with her lover in our family's villa and scheming how to seize our family's property. Don't you think she deserves it? Zhao Meishui shook even more violently and she dared not say a word. She kept her head down and covered the despair in her eyes. Dad, what are you talking about? Nangong Chuan was a bit angry, Meishui is not such a person. When I chased her, she thought I was broke and didn't know I was president of the Nangong family. How could a good woman like her scheme to seize my property? That's what Nangong Yunyi's mother would do. She married me for my money, didn't she? Smack. Grandfather Nangong was so angry that he slapped the face of Nangong Chuan. He said tearfully, Linger was the daughter of my old friend. That friend owed me one. He wanted to repay me in other ways, but I was too stupid and asked him to marry his daughter to you. Chapter 2203. Another story of Hua Xia 44. They didn't want to at first, but I like the girl so much that I begged them. But you made me let my friend down, and I won't be able to face that girl after I die. Tears were streaming down grandfather Nangong's face and he was trembling with anger. If I had known you were such a bastard, I wouldn't have married that girl to you. Before Zhao Meishui appeared, Nangong Chuan was a good and obedient son. When he asked Nangong Chuan to marry that girl, he agreed. He thought that Nangong Chuan would treat the girl well, but he didn't expect his son to fail her after Zhao Meishui appeared. If Zhao Meishui was a good woman, maybe he wouldn't be so angry. However, he had seen through Zhao Meishui from the very beginning, but his son didn't believe him. How could he accept it? You don't believe us? Okay, listen to the recording pen. Grandfather Nangong threw the recording pen to Nangong Chuan with trembling hands. A gleam of suspicion flashed through Nangong Chuan's eyes, and he, unable to resist his curiosity, finally pressed the button. Then a woman's familiar voice rang in the empty villa. I miss you, and the old man didn't die. A little girl called young Luo Feng saved him. I want you to cause another accident for him. I don't believe he won't die. I don't care. You must help me, not for me, but for our daughter. Do you have the heart to see her being bullied in the Nangong family by that bastard, Nangong Yunyi? As soon as the old man dies, I'll solve Nangong Chuan. Go ahead. I just want the Nangong family's property. Their lives have nothing to do with me. Besides, you are the man I love. How could I choose to marry Nangong Chuan if it wasn't for the Nangong family's property? After all, you're the only man I've ever loved in my life. What's mine is yours. Nangong Chuan had slept with Zhao Meishui for years. How could he not recognize her voice? He clenched the recording pen tightly, his eyes were bloodshot, and he looked up coldly at Zhao Meishui. Is it true? You married me just for my family's property? He couldn't believe his wife was so vicious. Zhao Meishui's lips were pale. She stepped forward and tried to hold Nangong Chuan's hand only to be shaken off by him. Don't touch me with your dirty hands. No, Chuan, let me explain. Zhao Meishui looked rather flustered and tears silently fell from her face. Nangong Chuan took a deep breath and tried to suppress the pain in his chest. Okay, I'll give you a chance to explain. Watching this, Nangong Yunyi only laughed sarcastically at the side. Just now, Nangong Chuan scolded him without asking what happened. Now the evidence was irrefutable, but he still fooled himself and gave her a chance to explain. This woman was really his true love. and they were the villains who separated them. Hongluan couldn't bear it anymore, so she kindly reminded him, "It's true that your daughter isn't yours. It's useless to explain. You can have a blood test with her." "Honey," Nangong Yunyi put his arm around Hongluan's waist and gave a smile, "these days we don't use a blood test but a paternity test." Chapter 2204. Another story of Hua Xia. 45. Zhao Meishui gradually collapsed to the ground. Nangong Yunyi was right. There was a paternity test now. How could she deny it? A paternity test would prove that Nangong Lan was not Nangong Chuan's daughter. "Chuan, I know I was wrong." Zhao Meishui tugged on Nangong Chuan's sleeve, crying pitifully, "I made a big mistake, but I really love you. You must believe me." Nangong Chuan's face turned from livid to white, and then from white to livid. He clenched his fist. "You mean what they said is true? You really cuckolded me? My daughter who I doted on for a dozen years is actually not my daughter." "Chuan, please forgive me, I know I was wrong." Zhao Meishui hugged Nangong Chuan's legs tightly. "If you give me another chance, I will never do it again." "Bitch." Nangong Chuan grabbed Zhao Meishui's hair and knocked her head hard against the wall. "I treated you well and even grieved my wife to death for you. And you cheated on me. I'm gonna kill you, bitch." At this moment, Nangong Chuan's eyes were all red and he hit Zhao Meishui's head against the wall in anger. Zhao Meishui was soon bleeding and the blood was all over the floor. "Enough." Seeing this, Grandfather Nangong snapped, "Do you really want to kill her? If you kill her, you'll be executed. Now divorce her and give her to the police. Let the police charge her with murder. She will not be able to get out of jail for the rest of her life. She had committed attempted murder. If he used his connections she would probably get a life sentence." Nangong Chuan collapsed to the ground, and he was holding his head in pain. What had he done all these years? Ah! Suddenly, a shrill cry came from downstairs. Before the crowd responded, Nangong Lan had quickly run upstairs. Her eyes were full of anger when she saw Zhao Meishui lying in a pool of blood. "Dad, why is Mom so seriously injured?" "Who injured her?" "Me." Nangong Chuan clenched his fist, his eyes still red with anger. "Dad," Nangong Lan screamed incredulously, "why did you do this to Mom? Why? You're really a bad person." Quote. Smack. Before she could finish, Nangong Chuan slapped her in the face. Nangong Lan stared in shock. Her dad, who had never touched her all these years, hit her. Did he have a mistress and want to abandon them? "How dare you scold me? Your mother's a real bitch. She cheated on me." Nangong Chuan's eyes were bloodshot. He slowly turned his eyes to the man beside him. "This man is your real dad. Don't call me dad anymore. That makes me sick." When he heard the recording, Nangong Chuan knew that the naked man was Zhao Meishui's lover. He was also Nangong Lan's real father. Sure enough, Nangong Lan's eyes popped open when she heard this. "What did you say? That's impossible. I am the daughter of the Nangong family. I am not the daughter of this man. Your mom admitted that he is your father." Nangong Chuan gnashed his teeth and clenched his fists. He had to control himself with all his strength, or else he would have punched Nangong Lan. Chapter 2205. Another story of Hua Xia. 46. Nangong Lan felt as if the whole sky was falling apart on her and she stumbled and fell with a thud, her face pale. "I am not Dad's daughter. I am just a bastard child. No." Ah! Nangong Lan went completely mad and rushed towards Zhao Meishui, who was also limp on the ground. "Tell me it's not true. I'm the miss of the Nangong family. I'm not a bastard." Lenur, Zhao Meishui had a lump in her throat. She knew it was all over. "Tell me Nangong Chuan is my dad, come on." Listening to the heart-wrenching roar of Nangong Lan, Zhao Meishui closed her eyes feebly and tears covered her face. Nangong Lan stumbled again and released Zhao Meishui. She chuckled and said in a desperate tone, "You are no longer my mom." She glared at Zhao Meishui and turned to leave the villa. Before leaving, she looked back at Nangong Yunyi and Hongluan with her vicious eyes. "Wait," Nangong Yunyi called her coldly. Nangong Lan stopped, choking up. "What else do you want? Now you have grabbed the Nangong family. Are you still not satisfied? Firstly, I am the rightful heir of the Nangong family. What do you mean by grab?" Secondly, you were also involved in the plot against grandfather. What? At this moment, all eyes turned to Nangong Yunyi, and even grandfather Nangong was somewhat incredulous. It was reasonable for Zhao Meishui to harm him, but he had never mistreated Nangong Lan even though he favored Nangong Yunyi. After all, she was also a child of the Nangong family. Besides, it seemed that Nangong Lan didn't know she was an illegitimate daughter, so why did she try to murder him? We just heard the latter part of the recording. There is also the former part. Quote. With a sneer, Nangong Yunyi reversed the recording. Two people's voices rang in the empty villa. Mom, why wasn't that old bastard killed this time? Is it because your man didn't hit him hard enough? Normally, he wouldn't be able to recover from such a serious injury. Who is young Luo Feng? How could she save the old bastard who was so seriously injured? I've heard of young Luo Feng, who was a prestigious student at Hua Xia University. It's said that she was missing after the bombing 5 years ago. I didn't know she had returned with Nangong Yunyi. Their conversation hadn't finished yet, but no one had any interest to hear more. No one said a word and the whole villa was quiet. Nangong Lan shivered, her face turned even paler, and she turned her eyes to Nangong Yunyi, her beautiful eyes wide with fright. Bitch. Nangong Chuan was the first to respond, and with a roar, he rushed up to Nangong Lan, slapped her hard in the face and knocked her to the floor. Her mouth was full of blood, her head was rumbling, and she was completely lost. How could it be? Why did Nangong Yunyi have a recording of my conversation with Mom? Impossible. This is impossible. Nangong Lan suddenly got up and pounced on Nangong Yunyi with scream, it must be you. You must have stealthily put the recording pen in the villa. Nangong Yunyi, I'm gonna kill you. Bang. Unfortunately, before she reached Nangong Yunyi, she was kicked away by him. She fell to the floor awkwardly and rolled over for a few times, but she couldn't get up. Chapter 2206. Another story of Hua Xia 47. Yunyi, call the police. Grandfather Nangong closed his eyes after saying this, and even Nangong Chuan standing at the side didn't stop it. Nangong Yunyi took a look at Zhao Meishui and her daughter, who were limp on the floor, called the police without hesitation, and then walked out with Hong Luan. Young Luo Feng was still waiting for them. From a distance, Nangong Yunyi saw the man and woman standing under the tree. They were as beautiful as a superb painting, aloof, unworldly, and incompatible with the noisy surroundings. Young Luo Feng. He stopped and looked at the woman in front of him, and a gleam of gratitude flashed through his eyes. If it weren't for young Luo Feng, perhaps he couldn't have defeated Zhao Meishui and Nangong Lan so easily. Let's go. Young Luo Feng shrugged and smiled. As always, Yun Xiao stood by her side and fixed his eyes on her as if she was the entire world for him. Okay, I have found the location of Shui Dong's pharmacy. Nangong Yunyi raised his eyebrows. As if thinking of an old friend, he smiled. The pharmacy of the Shui family. A bookworm with square glasses was sitting bored behind the counter. The pharmacy was quiet and empty and hadn't had any customers today. The bookworm sighed, raised his head to look at the silent pharmacy, and smiled wryly. These days the pressure from competitors is too great. It looks like I'll have to shut down the pharmacy. Just after he said this, he suddenly saw someone coming in, and he stood up hurriedly to greet him. May I help you? What? We haven't met for 5 years and you have forgotten us, bookworm. Quote. Hearing the familiar voice, Bookworm looked up in surprise, and when he saw the familiar face in front of him, he suddenly froze. Are you, Nangong Yunyi? Not just me. Young Luo Feng is also here. Nangong Yunyi laughed out loud and said. Although they weren't classmates with Bookworm, they were friends. Before they left, they hung out a lot. Although they were not very intimate friends, they got along quite well. Bookworm rubbed his eyes, and a look of surprise flashed through his gentle face. He looked at the gorgeous woman and his voice trembled. You're still alive? Sure, let me introduce. This is my wife Hong Luan, and the other is Yun Xiao, Young Luo Feng's husband. Bookworm was even more shocked. These two guys went missing for 5 years, but when they came back, they were both married. Nangong, talk with Bookworm, and Yun Xiao and I will take a break. Yun Luofeng poured a cup of tea for herself and Yun Xiao, and sat down at random. She had told Nangong Yunyi about her plan and he would know how to deal with it. Shui Dong, how are you doing these years? Nangong Yunyi put his arm around Shui Dong's shoulder and asked. Shui Dong gave a wry smile. After graduation, I inherited this pharmacy as ordered by my dad, but now there are too many pharmacies. The pressure of competition is so great that I can barely make ends meet. By the way, what happened to you back then? I heard you were dead. Did you see our bodies? Nangong Yunyi rolled his eyes at him. Yes, he had died, but his body was also missing. Now that he had come back alive, he wouldn't admit he had died once. Yun Luofeng and I came here to help you. Nangong Yunyi gave a handsome smile. Chapter 2207, Another Story of Hua Xia, 48. Help me. Shui Dong looked confused. How can they help me? Yun Luofeng has some special medicinal herbs. How long will it take you to be the #1 pharmacy of Hua Xia if we give you these medicinal herbs? What? Not understanding what he meant, Shui Dong asked in astonishment. For example, she has a medicinal herb that can strengthen a person's body. With it, a weak person who is too frail to stand a gust of wind can be suddenly 100 times stronger. For example, if you have a cold, a medicinal herb can cure you immediately without any hidden problems. And, if you get stabbed, you can be saved as long as you've got a single breath left. It seemed that the spiritual herbs in Yun Luofeng's hand were also magic. Oh, yes, there were also many medicinal herbs that could help people cultivate, but there weren't any cultivators in Hua Xia, so unfortunately, those spiritual herbs were of no use here. As for those medicinal herbs that he just described to Shui Dong, she could provide as much as he wanted. Boom. Shui Dong felt as if something exploded in his mind. Are there really such magical medicines in the world? Why haven't I heard of them? Well, if you really have these medicines, I think I can be the #1 pharmacy in Hua Xia within 10 years. 10 years. Yun Luofeng slowly rose from the chair. It's too long. I can't wait so long. 1 year. I want your pharmacy to be the #1 of Hua Xia within 1 year. Well, Shui Dong looked hesitant. 1 year was too short, so he wasn't quite sure about it. Besides, these magic medicines must be certified before they could be sold, which would take a month or so. With this in mind, Shui Dong put the question out. Certificate? That's no problem. I'll ask my grandfather to get it for us. You don't have to worry about the government. No one will pick on you. With Nangong Yunyi's assurance, Shui Dong breathed a sigh of relief. I'll try. Okay, Yun Luofeng smiled. Change the name of the pharmacy to the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy. We only sell traditional Chinese medicine, no Western medicine. Yun Luofeng was never a fan of Western medicine. She thought that Hua Xia had a history of 5,000 years and had great figures like Hua Tuo as early as in ancient times. How could Western medicine be compared with traditional Chinese medicine? Unfortunately, traditional Chinese medicine had fallen into disuse. Nowadays, there were too few Chinese medicine practitioners who could master it, which made Chinese medicine inferior to Western medicine. That was why Yun Luofeng studied Chinese medicine when she was at Hua Xia University. Besides, you'll be the store manager of the pharmacy. My teacher Fu Ru used to be a professor of traditional Chinese medicine at Hua Xia University. We'll hire him to be the resident physician of the pharmacy. Both of you will get 10% of the shares of the pharmacy. Shui Dong nodded hurriedly. He had heard about Fu Ru when he was in college, but it was reported that he raped a female student and was fired by the university, but his medical skills were very good. Nangong will take the medicinal herbs for identification later, and the pharmacy will open immediately after the certificate is issued. A cold gleam flashed through Yun Luofeng's eyes. Another reason why she wanted to make money in this way was that the company of her so-called uncle was a pharmaceutical company, and it had cooperated with several large hospitals. Now, she was going to put his company out of business. She was going to make him pay for what he had done to her bit by bit. 1 year quickly passed. During the year, Yun Luofeng didn't just stay in Hua Xia but would occasionally return to the continent of 7 provinces for some time. Since she knew the channels between the 2 continents and was able to go back and forth freely. However, there was a special requirement, which was that only true God-level spirit cultivators could open the channel. Chapter 2208. Another story of Hua Xia, 49. The Yun Pharmaceutical Company. In a luxurious office, Yun Tianqi smashed the papers in his hand on the desk, and with a livid face, he glared at the man standing in front of him. Why is the firm's revenue so bad this year? Not even a tenth as usual. The marketing minister, a middle-aged woman with black mirror eyes, pushed her glasses up her nose and said solemnly, "President, there is a recently opened place called the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy. A lot of people were attracted to it and no longer went to hospitals, even if they just had minor colds. But our company only cooperates with hospitals. Now the hospital's performance isn't good, so our performance has also deteriorated." In the past year, Yun Tianqi hired a young girl as his secretary and was busy making love to her and keeping it from his wife. He really had no time to keep an eye on the company. The Godly Doctor's Pharmacy, Yun Tianqi sneered, "It sounds like a fraud. I can't believe people would believe it. There is no Godly Doctor in the world. Now I'm going to expose the true colors of the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy." Yun Tianqi stood up angrily and walked quickly out of the office. The Godly Doctor's Pharmacy. The pharmacy used to have very few customers after they got a business license a year ago. After all, no one would believe there was really a godly doctor in the world. Then the grandson of one of Grandfather Nangong's old friends suffered from a gunshot wound and was dying. Grandfather Nangong thought of the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy and bought a spiritual herb here to save the life of his friend's grandson. It was a dangerous operation to remove the bullet and it was likely that the patient would die, but with that spiritual herb, his old friend's grandson managed to survive. From then on, the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy became famous. Besides, it had the spiritual herbs that could strengthen people's physique, which attracted thousands of people to come here. However, it wasn't long before they stopped selling the spiritual herbs that could greatly strengthen people's physique. Young Luo Feng gave those spiritual herbs to the state. Young Luo Feng had no concern for the Long Xia continent when she was there because she had no sense of belonging to the continent no matter before or now. But Hua Xia was different. This was where she was born and brought up. She had special feelings for Hua Xia. With those spiritual herbs, Hua Xia's army would be stronger, and foreign enemies would no longer be able to invade it. Grandfather Nangong was grateful for what young Luo Feng did, so were the national leaders. After Grandfather Nangong mentioned the strength of young Luo Feng, the national leaders awarded her the military rank of Major General. If Hua Xia had such a powerful person behind it, it would be a great power in the world sooner or later. It was because of the great support of the state that the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy developed so quickly. It even attracted many foreigners. At the moment, outside the pharmacy, people consciously queued up. Without arguing, people waited quietly. From a distance, Yun Tianqi saw the long lines. With a frown, he tried to jump the queue. "Hey, what are you doing?" His action irritated an old man. The old man glared at him and said, "Don't you see we're all queuing here? If you want to buy medicine, get back in line. Don't affect us." Yun Tianqi's face changed. "Grandpa, this pharmacy must be a fraud. Listen to its ridiculous name. Why are you willing to be swindled by it?" The old man looked at Yun Tianqi contemptuously. "Young man, didn't you read the news? This pharmacy is very famous. It can even cure cancer patients, and has been praised by our national leaders. Even cancer could be cured. What a joke." Yun Tianqi sneered. "Grandpa, you must have been swindled. I'm sure this pharmacy is a fraud." Chapter 2209. Another story of Hua Xia, 50. He thought when he said this that the people around him would feel curious and ask him, and then he would make up some scandals about the pharmacy, which would arouse people's suspicion. However, as soon as he said this, a burly man beside him pushed him hard and angrily said, "Fuck off if you don't want to seek medical treatment here. Don't waste our time." "Yes, how dare you frame the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy? Don't you know how famous it is? You might as well go back to read some news about it as the grandpa told you." An onlooker recognized Yun Tianqi and scoffed, "I think I've seen this guy. Oh, yes, he is the president of the Yun Pharmaceutical Company. I heard that the profits of the Yun Pharmaceutical Company have been declining recently. Did Mr. President want to deliberately frame the pharmacy for his company's profits? Ha ha ha." All of a sudden, all eyes were fixed on Yun Tianqi and he was so ashamed that he felt as if his face was burning. I didn't expect he was the president of the Yun Pharmaceutical Company. I remember that I took the medicine of his company in a hospital, but instead of getting better, I got inflammation and complaining was useless. The medicines of the Yun Pharmaceutical Company are trash. I will never use the medicines made by that company in my life because I don't want to be poisoned by their medicines. Hearing these words, Yun Tianqi turned livid. He desperately pushed the people surrounding him aside and quickly fled. When he returned to the Yun Pharmaceutical Company, he immediately held a meeting and demanded all members of the management to attend it. At the moment, in the conference room, Yun Tianqi looked a bit angry. He looked around at the crowd fiercely and shouted angrily, "Why didn't you tell me what was happening to the Yun Pharmaceutical Company?" If it weren't for the year-end review, he would have had no idea that the Yun Pharmaceutical Company was doing so badly this year. The executives all looked at each other. They did tell Yun Tianqi about it, but he had been fascinated by a woman and was busy making love to her for the last year. He didn't pay any attention to the company. Besides, Yun Tianqi thought that the Yun Pharmaceutical Company had developed so well that he could enjoy his life without any worries. He didn't think that someone could squeeze the Yun Pharmaceutical Company out of the industry. A middle-aged man said, "President, I think we need to make up for it now." Yun Tianqi fell silent. He was able to develop the Yun Pharmaceutical Company to its status today because of the property of Yun Luo Feng's parents, the strength of Li Quiqui's family, and more importantly, his wisdom and talents. He wouldn't have given anyone the chance to give the Yun Pharmaceutical Company such a blow if he hadn't been indulging in sensual pleasures. Though the pharmacy has a great reputation, it appeared only 1 year ago and will be no match for our Yun Pharmaceutical Company in financial strength, said the middle-aged man with a smile. "So, I suggest we acquire the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy." Yun Tianqi's eyes darkened. "Who is the owner of the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy?" "I have checked into this. Its boss is just a student who graduated from Hua Xia University. He is from an ordinary family who runs a pharmacy. As for the resident doctor of the pharmacy, he is the famous Professor Fu Ru." "Professor Fu Ru?" Yun Tianqi gave a cold smile. When he kicked Yun Luo Feng into the orphanage, this old bastard took her in. Before you start to acquire it, spread the news that the doctor of the pharmacy raped a female student. With such a depraved doctor, the pharmacy is not trustworthy. At that time, he would come out as a savior and offer to acquire the pharmacy, and the owner of the pharmacy would be very grateful to him. Chapter 2210. Another story of Hua Xia. 51. Yes, Mr. President. Soon the meeting was over. Everyone went to perform their duties, and no one talked about the meeting anymore. However, a few days later, a piece of news hit headlines in all sorts of newspapers. Professor Fu Ru of Hua Xia University, who was suspected of raping a female student and fired by the university, is now the resident doctor of the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy. Is such a doctor reliable? Do you still dare to buy the medicine in this pharmacy? As soon as the news was widespread, the crowded Godly Doctor's Pharmacy suddenly became even more crowded. Numerous journalists gathered at the gate and almost blocked the road. At the moment, Shui Dong was sweating heavily in the pharmacy. The journalists would have rushed in if they hadn't been stopped by the staff of the pharmacy. Even so, Shui Dong still heard the sharp questions of those journalists from outside the pharmacy. "Mr. Shui, why do you employ such a person who has neither medical nor professional ethics as your resident doctor? I have reason to suspect your medicines have problems. Can a rapist be a good resident doctor? Please give us an explanation. Give the public an explanation." In the pharmacy, Fu Ru's lips kept quivering. Several times he tried to get up and go out but was stopped by Shui Dong. "Teacher, you must not go out. These people are just waiting for you to go out. Just stay here. I have called Yun Luo Feng. She will solve it." During the last year, the pharmacy experienced a lot of ups and downs, but he managed to overcome all these hardships. But now, facing such a serious problem, he was completely at loss and had to turn to Yun Luo Feng for help. "Excuse me." Just then, a child's voice suddenly came from behind the crowd. Hearing the childish voice, those journalists looked at the source of the voice in surprise. Behind the crowd, 2 cute children walked out hand in hand. They were so adorable that the crowd forgot to ask them why they were here. Seeing the children were going to enter into the pharmacy, a journalist hurriedly stopped them. Don't you know this pharmacy has a problem? Looking up at the female journalist who stopped them, Yun Nianfeng said expressionlessly, it's none of your business. You, the female journalist turned livid in anger. This kid looked so cute but was ill-bred. She gnashed her teeth, I'm just being kind. How can you be so rude? I tell you, the medicines in this pharmacy are toxic and will poison people. If you don't want to kill all your family, don't buy and take the medicine here. There was only a rumor about Fu Ru, but she said the medicines in the pharmacy were toxic. And she even cursed Yun Nianfeng's family. Yun Nianfeng, who was going to enter the pharmacy, stopped and turned to the female journalist, do you have any manners? You blocked the pharmacy's door and spread rumors. Is this your manners? You said the medicines here are poisonous. Okay, if I'm still alive after I take it, can you go and die? Yun Chudian didn't want to be polite to such a vicious person, so she said with a sneer, brother, Mom said we didn't have to be polite to such people. If they won't leave, drive them out. Yun Chudian blinked and turned her head to these journalists. She also said she would clear Grand Master Fu Ru's name in 3 days. By the way, I am saying this to our customers, not you journalists. Chapter 2211, Another Story of Hua Xia, 52. These journalists were irritated by Yun Chudian's words, especially that female journalist. She turned livid and glared at the two children. You two brats are bullshitting here. What makes you think you can drive us out? Where are your parents? Call them out. Brother. Yun Chudian curled her lips and turned her head to Yun Nianfeng. Swish. Just then, the female journalist felt a gust of wind passed by her, and that well-dressed pretty little boy disappeared. While she was looking for him, Yun Nianfeng suddenly appeared behind her and kicked her away. Ah! The crowd was intimidated and screamed, and the journalists quickly took out their cameras and took pictures. They got a perfect headline for tomorrow. The son of the godly doctor's pharmacy's boss beat a journalist in public. But Yun Nianfeng didn't care at all. Anyway, Fu Ru Grand Master's grievances would be cleared up sooner or later. As for the female journalist, he would ask Mom to find out who she was. If she was only a journalist, she wouldn't be so aggressive. She probably wasn't just a journalist. Ignoring the crowd behind him, Yun Nianfeng walked into the pharmacy. With a smile on his cute face, he walked toward Fu Ru. Grand Master, Mom said it's time for you to go home for dinner. Fu Ru paused. He looked at the journalists outside the door and finally nodded. He got up from his chair and screwed up his courage to walk towards the door. When he walked to the door, the journalists all rushed forward and quickly took a picture of his old and decadent face. Some of the journalists wanted to ask him insulting questions, but they stopped when they remembered how Yun Nianfeng kicked that female journalist. Relieved to see that the journalists didn't gather around, Fu Ru walked quickly through the crowd and went to his car behind the crowd. Just as Yun Xiao served the dishes, Fu Ru walked in through the door. As soon as he walked into the home, he smelled the aroma of the food and immediately forgot the unpleasant experience just now. Luo Feng, your husband is very good at cooking, haha. Fu Ru was happy for young Luo Feng. This man was not only powerful, but also very good at cooking, and even the chefs at 5-star hotels were far behind him in culinary skill. Most importantly, he always followed Yun Luo Feng's words. Yun Luo Feng told him to go east and he would not go west. Yun Luo Feng told him to chase the cat and he would not chase the dog. There were very few men who were excellent yet obedient like him in this world. His only downside was that he was too reticent. Of course, such reticence was only for others. In front of Yun Luo Feng, he always smiled. Even if he didn't say anything, his eyes seemed to be talking to her. Nianfeng, what's the matter? Yun Luo Feng raised her eyebrows, looked at Yun Nianfeng and asked. Yun Nianfeng pouted, Mom, those journalists are so hateful. They even cursed me. I think it would be nice if we just killed them. The corner of Fu Ru's mouth twitched. Fortunately, after staying with him for a year, he had become accustomed to Yun Nianfeng's astonishing remarks. This is Hua Xia. Bai Yan glanced at Yun Nianfeng, you can't kill people, understand? All right. Yun Nianfeng nodded reluctantly. He preferred the continent of 7 provinces, where power talked. But when he was in Hua Xia, he had to tolerate a lot of things. Chapter 2212. Another story of Hua Xia. 53. Don't worry, said young Luo Feng, hugging young Nianfeng with a smile, soon everything will be over. Fu Ru wanted to say something but only sighed in the end. Luo Feng, I'm sorry for bringing you into this trouble. Quote. Teacher, I came back this time to settle the matter, and I already guessed who did this to you. Young Luo Feng's eyes flickered. Soon, the matter would be over, and it wouldn't take long for those people to get their comeuppance. Young Luo Feng soon calmed down and mildly said, but you have to tell me exactly what happened back then so that I can find evidence for you. A complicated gleam flashed through Fu Ru's eyes. That girl was my student. She came from a poor family, and I funded her education. Young Luo Feng was silent. Teacher had been funding some poor students for years, which she knew 5 years ago. Unfortunately, I didn't expect that she changed after she entered university. She even sold her body for money. Fu Ru looked helpless and grieved. How could he not grieve when the student he had been sponsoring did such a shameless thing? After I found out, I tried to dissuade her from doing this, but she didn't listen to me at all and instead asked me for money. Asked you for money? Young Luo Feng glanced at Fu Ru. Go on. She wanted to buy a car and asked me to lend her the money to buy it. I refused, and then she said she would ruin my reputation. I thought she was just threatening me, but one day she suddenly told me that she had repented and wouldn't do such things any longer, and said she had some study problems to ask me. I believed her and went to see her. For convenience, we met in the school's laboratory, but the class was over when we met. I asked her if she had problems with her experiments, but she asked me again for money. This time she told me that she had borrowed money at a very high interest rate and would be killed if she didn't pay it back. I didn't believe her, so I turned to leave, but suddenly she took off her clothes and shouted for help. As for the chat logs, they're fake. Listening to Fu Ru's words, young Luo Feng stroked her chin. She exchanged a glance with Yun Xiao beside her and turned her eyes to Fu Ru. I see. I'll take care of this. Don't worry. A cold gleam flickered across her eyes. Do you know where the student is now? Fu Ru nodded. She was a freshman when that happened, and now she is a senior. I don't know her address, but it should be on record in the school file. I'll have my acquaintance get a copy of the files for me. No, young Luo Feng shook her head. It's enough for me to know she is still there. I'll look for the files. Hearing this, Fu Ru paused and then frowned. I'm afraid it's not so easy to get the school files. Young Luo Feng didn't answer Fu Ru's words but looked up at Fu Ru with her clear eyes, which made Fu Ru's heart tremble. Teacher, 3 days from now, I will help you clear your name. Clear my name? For years, carrying this stain, he was almost cast aside by the world. Now young Luo Feng told him that he could still clear his name. Chapter 2213. Another story of Hua Xia. 54. Alright, I believe in you. He believed in her merely because this girl was his student. Young Luo Feng and Yun Xiao met each other's eyes, and her lips turned up with a smile. Yun Xiao, let's go. The business here can end very soon. Fu Ru blankly looked at them. By the time he regained his senses, the two of them had already disappeared. Every student left a record in the school, and this record definitely contained their address. With young Luo Feng and Yun Xiao's strength, they freely came and went in the archive room and quickly found the address. What she did not expect was that the girl named Lin Qing lived in the same neighborhood as young Luo Feng's apartment building. She entered the familiar neighborhood and swiftly found Lin Qing's residence. Currently, inside Lin Qing's home, there was a live pornographic scene playing on the sofa. The woman had short hair and sparkling earrings hanging from her ears. She had an extremely good figure, and her skin was incredibly smooth, but the dark shadows under her eyes forcefully ruined her beauty. The man was also a problem youth with a head of eye-catching blonde hair. He was laid over the woman strenuously exercising. His back was dripping with sweat and his hair tightly stuck to his forehead. It was a while before they stopped their exercise. The woman laid over the man, panting for air, but her face was full of pleasure. Bro Huang, the money given to us by that boss back then is nearly all spent. I will extort another sum from him to provide for us. The blonde man addressed as Bro Huang was surprised. This matter has passed for several years already, how will you extort it from him? You must not know this, but back when he had me frame teacher Fu Ru, I secretly recorded it so that I could keep extorting money from him later, Lin Qing gleefully explained with a gloating smile on her face. The blonde man ignited a cigarette. You are truly cruel, even framing the teacher who helped you go to school. TCH, Lin Qing derisively snorted. He merely provided financial assistance for me for a few years, it's only about $10,000 in total. It's not that big of a favor. However, he is the inhumane one. We had known each other for several years already. But when I was hounded by loan sharks and wanted him to help me, he actually would not help me no matter what. Hatred flashed through her eyes. If he had helped me, I wouldn't have helped other people to frame him. You have to know, that boss gave me several $1,000,000. After paying back the several $100,000 debt, I still had several million to support me. Only an idiot wouldn't want such a profit. However, she was thankfully smart and was afraid that boss would not acknowledge the debt, so she buried the evidence of him having her frame Fu Ru and told him she gave the evidence to a friend. If that boss was unwilling to pay the money and wanted to kill her to silence her, then the evidence would be revealed. That was why the boss added an extra million on top of the base price. As soon as she thought of her intelligence, Lin Qing was extremely proud of herself. As for setting Fu Ru up, he brought this on himself and could not blame anyone else. Who told him to be unwilling to borrow money so that she could pay back the loan sharks? Xiao Qing, I knew you would have some insurance. We can live the rest of our life without worry now. Upon hearing that they could continue extorting money, the blonde man's eyes brightened and could not resist initiating another round of vigorous exercise. Money was so versatile, it could make people kick their benefactor in the teeth and sell them out. It could also make people turn crazy. Chapter 2214, Another Story of Hua Xia, 55. Who's there? Suddenly, Lin Qing appeared to have detected something and immediately looked up. Under the moonlight, a woman was watching her with a grin. A handsome man stood next to her. His appearance was very cool, and he did not even look up, only revealing his profile, but his profile was stunning enough already. Who are you? Why are you inside my home? Lin Qing did not have time to be surprised. Her eyes were full of fear, and her voice was trembling. Young Luo Feng waved the cell phone in her hands and said with a faint smile, I have recorded your conversation just now. While we are at it, can you tell me who's the boss who bribed you? Hearing this, panic flashed across Lin Qing's frightened eyes. She hastily covered her body with a thin blanket. Just who are you? Young Luo Feng's smile grew wider. Fu Ru is my teacher. Fu Ru is my teacher. Boom. Instantly, Lin Qing's face turned ashen, and she started trembling more. You came to find evidence for Fu Ru. No, I can't allow that. I can't let you have that evidence. Quick, snatch her phone. The man, who laid over Lin Qing, instantly reacted and scrambled up. His naked body was completely exposed, but thankfully, young Luo Feng had closed her eyes the second he stood up. Seeing this, the blonde man inwardly sneered and swiftly darted toward young Luo Feng, lifting his hand to steal the phone from her hand. Unfortunately, before he could get near young Luo Feng, the man, who had his face turned, did not even look at him and a burst of energy shot out with a boom. The blonde man flew back and kept spitting out blood. Ah! Seeing this strange scene, Lin Qing shrieked, Ghost! Have you ever seen a live person send someone flying back without moving? Not unless he had a ghost beside him. You want to steal my phone? Young Luo Feng's smile grew. Tell me, who had you frame my teacher? Lin Qing's mind turned blank, and she turned dizzy and was about to faint when she felt a power controlling her nerves and causing her mind to be extremely awake. This knowledge caused Lin Qing to be more terrified. I don't know who she is. I only know the boss is a woman. Woman. Young Luo Feng frowned. When did teacher offend a woman? Then can you get in contact with her? Young Luo Feng calmly asked. I have a method to contact her. But after I contact her, can you spare me? Lin Qing was trembling from head to toe, including her legs. Pee flowed between her legs, sending a putrid smell into the air. Young Luo Feng smiled. Teacher financially assisted your studies, yet you bit the hand that fed you and helped someone frame him. Tell me, can I spare you? You, Lin Qing's face turned pale. If you don't spare me, I won't help you contact her. She originally thought that young Luo Feng would turn pale with fright after hearing this, but a smile remained on her face. Young Luo Feng stared at her with a faint smile. Do you think I can't find her without you? I merely don't want to waste too much time. Of course, it's not a problem even if you don't say it. I will just directly kill you and consider it revenge for teacher. No, Lin Qing's eyes were filled with fear. Killing someone is illegal. You can't kill me. Chapter 2215, Another Story of Hua Xia, 56. Young Luo Feng wore a smile on her face, but that smile stirred fear in Lin Qing's heart, especially because the aura around that woman was like a giant mountain and suppressed her to the point of being unable to breathe. This was the first time she had felt death so near her. Tell me, are you willing to contact that person? This sentence was like the straw that broke that camel's back and made Lin Qing's mind completely crumble. Her face was ashen and full of fright. I will help you, I will help you. I beg you to not kill me. Hearing that, young Luo Feng retracted her aura and her lips slightly turned up. Then call her right now. I would like to know who dared to set my teacher up. Under that woman's intimidating aura, Lin Qing shakily picked up her phone. That blonde youth was lying motionless on the ground, not daring to even lift his head, scared that these two people would really kill them. I have that boss's number. I used this number to contact her all these years. Because I kept evidence to threaten her, she doesn't dare to completely cut off contact with me. This was the path that she found herself to make it easier for her to blackmail that woman. She did not expect it to benefit young Luo Feng. After saying that, Lin Qing pressed a number and turned on speakerphone at young Luo Feng's indication. Didn't I say to not find me unless it's something important? Why are you calling me? A furious voice came from the other end of the phone. The voice was purposefully lowered, perhaps afraid of being overheard, but young Luo Feng instantly recognized the speaker of the voice. Her entire person underwent a transformation. A chilly and nefarious smile appeared on her lips, and a storm rumbled in her dark eyes. Lin Qing nearly dropped her phone from fright. Her face deathly pale, she stared. I'm short on money recently, can you send some money to me again? You are gutsy. I gave you so much money back then, yet you dare to find me still. That voice was very angry and sharp, but it deepened young Luo Feng's smile. Although many years have passed, there was no way she would be unable to recognize the owner of this voice. It was this person who seized her family's wealth and expelled her from her home. She did not expect that even after she lost her life in an explosion, these people to be unwilling to spare the teacher who raised her. After hearing that, Lin Qing also grew angry. At that time, she had risked ruining her reputation to frame Fu Ru, yet this woman wants to easily kick her away. Keep dreaming. If you don't give me money, then I will publicize how you bribed me to frame teacher Fu Ru. You, the woman on the other end was indescribably angry. After a moment of silence, she said, name a place, and we will meet up. I will give you money then. Meet up. Lin Qing was startled. This woman did not show her face even when she had her frame Fu Ru, but she wanted to meet with her now. Fear faintly rose in her heart. Agree to it. A voice exploded in Lin Qing's mind, scaring her to the point of nearly throwing her phone out. That was right, that voice did not come from next to her ears, it reverberated in her mind. No wonder it scared her witless. Lin Qing bit her lips. All right, then we will meet at the European cafe at the entrance to my school. All right. After saying that, the woman on the other end directly hung up and did not give Lin Qing time to respond. Lin Qing glanced at young Luo Feng and timidly asked, is this enough? Chapter 2216, Another Story of Hua Xia, 57. A smile rose on young Luo Feng's lips. Tomorrow, I will come and find you at the arranged meet-up location, but don't die too quickly. After saying that, they disappeared into thin air. Yes, they disappeared into thin air. This supernatural scene caused Lin Qing to be paralyzed with fear. It was a while before she recalled young Luo Feng's words. But, don't die too quickly. That sentence was like a curse and echoed in her ears, causing her face to turn pale. Could it be that the boss wants to kill her? No, she had evidence against her in her possession. She absolutely wouldn't dare to do that. Thinking about this, Lin Qing relaxed. That woman just now was merely scaring her. How could that boss really kill her? Xiao Qing, she's gone. The blonde youth stopped feigning death and got up from the ground. Looking at the empty room, he relaxed. How did you provoke a freak like that? To the blonde youth, young Luo Feng and her husband were freaks without a doubt. Lin Qing bit her lips. Come and see her with me tomorrow. What? Hearing this, the blonde youth jumped up and dryly chuckled. Xiao Qing, don't kid with me. Didn't you hear what that woman said just now? That boss wants to kill you. Lin Qing's eyes darkened. Don't forget, you spent quite a bit of that several million of mine. What? It's none of your business now that we have trouble. The blonde youth chuckled. I don't want to enter this muddy water. Go by yourself. After saying that, he picked up his clothes from the sofa and swiftly walked to the door without looking back. You, Lin Qing's expression dramatically shifted. If you leave then don't ever come back. However, the blonde youth still left. He did not take a single look at Lin Qing the whole time. Lin Qing crumbled to the ground, tears flowing out of her eyes, and her ashen face was eclipsed by despair. Men were truly unreliable. Back when she had money, he went along with whatever she said. But now that the money was all spent and they ran into trouble, he fled faster than anyone. However, Lin Qing had no alternative. She silently stood up, allowing her tears to flow freely. Teacher Fu Ru, I'm sorry. It was only now that Lin Qing felt guilt. Of course, if it weren't for young Luo Feng's appearance, she never would have felt that she did something wrong to Fu Ru. It was only because she understood that even if that boss didn't do anything to her, young Luo Feng also wouldn't spare her. This was why she regretted it. She regretted plotting against Fu Ru. If she could do it all over again, she definitely wouldn't commit the same mistake. At the same time, inside a luxurious mansion, Li Quiqui hung up the phone with a deep frown. Who called? What happened? Yun Tianqi asked as he looked up at her. Nothing. Yun Tianqi was ignorant about her actions from back then. Otherwise, he would never have allowed her to bribe Lin Qing with such a large sum of money. Forget it if you don't want to talk about it. Yun Tianqi was in a very good mood and did not want to hound her about it. He was beaming and his mood, which had been repressed for a long time, turned brighter as well. Li Quiqui sat next to him. What happened today that made you so happy? Do you know about the godly doctor's pharmacy? Yun Tianqi smiled. Soon, that godly doctor's pharmacy will become part of our Yun Pharmaceutical Corporation. Oh, Li Quiqui's eyebrow rose. She had heard of the godly doctor's pharmacy, as many companies were interested in acquiring it. Was Yun Tianqi capable of acquiring the godly doctor's pharmacy? Chapter 2217, Another Story of Hua Xia, 58. In truth, it was because I was lucky that I got this opportunity. Yun Tianqi had a satisfied smile hanging on his lips. Perhaps you don't know who is the residing doctor at Godly Doctor's Pharmacy. It is Fu Ru, whose name was dragged through the mud back then. I already had someone publicize this, and I bribed the reporters as well. I would like to see how the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy will recover this time. Li Quiqui was taken back. She did not expect that Fu Ru could still go and reside at the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy. Someone would accept a person with such a notorious history. She recalled her meeting with Lin Qing tomorrow, and her mind unconsciously became jittery and restless. Even she did not understand why. It was merely Lin Qing, an insignificant ant that she could kill with a pinch. If Lin Qing didn't possess evidence, she would not have allowed her to live for 5 years. However, she did not waste these 5 years. She had thoroughly investigated Lin Qing and discovered that she did not have any close friends, nor did she have any family. So where would she hide that evidence? She would have ignored Lin Qing if she had stayed within her boundary, but that girl dared to come and threaten her. She was clearly seeking death. Husband, since the Godly Doctor's Pharmacy will soon be yours, then I will be at ease. Li Quiqui's eyes sparkled and she leaned into Yun Tianqi's arms. Her fingers gently danced over his chest and seductively said, "It has been a while since we have." Yun Tianqi's brows wrinkled, disgust flickering through his eyes. Li Quiqui was already old and faded, how could she compare to his little girlfriend's youth and good looks? He had already given his provision to his little girlfriend, so where would he get the energy to deal with an old woman? Hence, he impatiently shoved Li Quiqui away. I've been very busy these days. I don't have the energy to think about that. Very busy. Li Quiqui's expression shifted and she stood up with her hands on her hips. Yun Tianqi, tell me the truth, do you have a mistress? Over this past year, she could count the number of times that Yun Tianqi had touched her with her fingers. People all say that men were like wolves at 30 and like tigers at 40. At his age, how could Yun Tianqi endure it? Li Quiqui could not think of any other reason except for the fact that he had a mistress. What nonsense do you speak all day long? Yun Tianqi glanced at Li Quiqui. I work myself to death at the company every day, yet you still cause trouble for me as you please. Can't you let me rest? You. Just as Li Quiqui wanted to say something else, a voice came from upstairs. Dad, Mom, what are you doing? Li Quiqui harshly glared at Yun Tianqi before turning to look at the little girl hugging a teddy bear standing at the top of the stairs. The little girl was very adorable and looked like a porcelain doll. Her light pink princess dress further complemented her cuteness. I still have to go to school tomorrow. Why are you arguing? The little girl angrily puffed up her cheeks, her little hand was rubbing her sleepy eyes. There was clear discontent on her face. Li Quiqui awkwardly chuckled. Shui, Mom was just conversing with your dad, did we disturb you? Hurry back to bed, you still have classes tomorrow. Okay. After another glance at Yun Tianqi and Li Quiqui, Yun Shuilian obediently nodded and returned to her room, gently closing the door behind her. Li Quiqui ruthlessly pinched Yun Tianqi. If I learn that you found another woman, I absolutely won't forgive you. Yun Tianqi merely frowned while looking at her fierce glare and did not say anything. Chapter 2218, Another Story of Hua Xia, 59. The next day at dawn. Yun Nianfeng accepted his backpack from Yun Luo Feng, but he had an unhappy expression. Mother, I don't want to go to school. Why was this place so troublesome, and children had to go to school? He was absolutely uninterested in those brats in the school. The corner of Yun Luo Feng's lips twitched. Endure it for a few more days, and we can go back. It was Fu Ru's decision to make Yun Nianfeng and Yun Chudian go to school. She still remembered Fu Ru's expression after learning her children had never gone to school. It was as though he was looking at a stepmother. Her children were this old already, but she did not let them go to school. Hence, Yun Luofeng had no choice but to send them to school. Yet, Yun Nianfeng was wholly uninterested in the other children at school. Mother, even if you were sending me to school, you should have found one with a lot of beautiful women. In this school, whether it is the students or the teachers, none of them are good-looking. Yun Nianfeng was pouting, his pitiful expression striking sympathy in other people. However, why did his words sound deserving of a beating no matter how she understood it? To Yun Nianfeng though, his classmates were not nearly as good-looking as Yun Chudian, and his teachers could not measure to 1,000th of Yun Luofeng. What meaning was there for him to stay there? I will wrap up my business here in 2 days. Yun Luofeng's eyes glinted. She naturally did not waste her time this past year. She had fully dug up the evidence of Yun Tianqi and Li Quiqui's crime from back then. Even her parents were killed by these hyenas. As soon as she thought of that, her heart would ferociously squeeze in pain. She puffed out a large breath in anger. All right, time to leave. Yun Luofeng clapped Yun Nianfeng's shoulders and said, Nianfeng, you are the older brother. You must take good care of Chudian, understand? Mother, don't worry, I won't allow Tianer to be bullied. Yun Nianfeng took Yun Chudian's hand into his and swiftly pulled her out of the room. After they left, Yun Luofeng turned to look at the man next to her. Yun Xiao, the business here will end in a few days. Before we leave, I want you to accompany me to a place. At Ping City. Ping City was only a few hundred meters away from the capital, but it was a tiny city that could not hold a candle to the capital. At the same time, this was Yun Luofeng's old home. Yun Xiao, my family's mansions and assets in the capital have all been taken over by Yun Tianqi. Only the old home here remained. However, I heard that the old houses around here will soon be demolished and the inhabitants relocated. So if we don't come today, we won't have a chance in the future. 20 years ago, her parents brought her to their ancestral home to offer sacrifices to their ancestors, and this was also where they perished. Now that she thought about it, Yun Tianqi and his wife probably did not want to give up the mansion her parents left behind in the capital, which is why they especially waited for them to arrive at the ancestral home before acting. Thankfully, she survived that day. Young Luo Feng walked along the old-fashioned road and looked at the bright red, demolish, written all over the houses around her. A bitter smile crept up on her face. Perhaps sensing her mood, Yuan Shao tightly pulled her into his arms, his eyes loving and warm. No matter what, I'm here. He would always be next to her and never abandon her. We're here. Young Luo Feng stopped walking. She gently pushed open the shabby door and slowly entered. There was still dried blood staining the floor. The messy room revealed the scene from more than 20 years ago. That day, she hid under the bed and helplessly watched as her parents fell in puddles of blood, so scared that she did not dare to make any sound. Chapter 2219, Another Story of Hua Xia 60. She was still young at that time, but that event had become a trauma that could never be wiped away from her mind. Fenger. Suddenly, Yuan Shao tugged Young Luo Feng and gestured to the front of them with his eyes. Young Luo Feng was startled and followed his line of sight. She saw a husband and wife searching for something in a nearby corner. This couple's expression was very lost, as though they could not walk out of this maze no matter what they did. More importantly, their bodies were transparent. Young Luo Feng hurriedly clutched her mouth, tears flowing down her face. She started lightly trembling. If it were not for Yuan Shao holding her, perhaps she would have fallen. Finally, she pacified her mind and slowly walked toward the couple. Her voice was very light, afraid that she would alarm them if she was any louder. What are you looking for? Hearing Young Luo Feng, the man turned to look at her. He evidently did not recognize her and dazedly said, I'm looking for my daughter. Have you seen her? Young Luo Feng's tears started following again. She tightly bit her lips. I have seen her. Really? The man wanted to grasp Young Luo Feng in his excitement, but his hand went straight through Young Luo Feng's body. However, it was like he did not notice it. Then can you tell me where my daughter is? We have been looking for her for a long time, but she never returned. Young Luo Feng was somewhat pale. You've been looking for her this whole time. My daughter doesn't have a lot of courage and is always scared when it gets dark outside. She is a bit of a picky eater and only likes to eat her mom's meals. It's already so late now, I wonder if she ate outside. Her personality is also weak and easily bullied. Unless I find her and can be next to her to protect her, I am worried. Ah, the woman exclaimed, it's already so late. You continue to wait for our daughter, I will go prepare dinner. After saying that, the woman walked straight through the wall into the kitchen, but what food could the house possibly have? So it did not take long for the woman to float back out and furiously ask, Old Yun, where's the food? Where's the pork shoulder and mantis shrimp that I bought? Young Luo Feng tightly clenched her fists. She remembered that before her parents died, they had prepared a table of dishes already and there were her favorite pork shoulder and mantis shrimp in those dishes. Now, their memory had stopped at the night before they died, but they still remembered to look for her. And they persistently continued to look for her day after day. Dad, Mom, Young Luo Feng finally could not control her emotions anymore, and tears freely flowed on her ashen face, covering it completely. The man was startled. You are, Fenger. How did you grow so big in the short time since I've seen you? Dad, Mom, you don't need to worry. I'm quite brave now and past the age where I'm afraid of the dark a long time ago. You also don't need to worry about me being hungry. This is your son-in-law, his culinary skills are really good, and he's feeding me well. Don't worry about me being bullied. Ever since I left that year, no one could bully me anymore. Young Luo Feng's voice was trembling, and she was only able to say everything by biting her lips with great force. Old Yun, I remember now. Have you forgotten? The woman's eerie voice drifted toward them. We are already dead. We were killed by someone. Chapter 2220, Another Story of Hua Xia 61. The man's expression turned blank, and he dazedly said, That's right, that did happen. We are already dead. Then what about our daughter? Is she alive? Oh, right. Recalling something, the man turned to look at Young Luo Feng. You say you are our daughter, then how many years has it been since we died? Pain gripped Young Luo Feng's heart. 20 years. It's been 20 years, huh? The man looked like he was reminiscing the past, and a smile rose on his face. So time passes by this quickly. It's already been 20 years. No wonder our daughter is so big. His voice contained helplessness, regret, and also deep pain. You are really, Xiao Fenger. The woman floated to young Luo Feng before looking at the man beside her. He is your husband. Mom. Young Luo Feng wanted to hold the woman's hand, but she was unable to do so. She took a deep breath before saying, wait for me. I will definitely find a way to revive you. I absolutely will. Xiao Mo, come out. The moment she finished speaking, a light flashed, and Xiao Mo's figure appeared out of thin air. He looked at young Luo Feng with his head tilted. Master, you want me to think of a way to help you revive these two people? That's right, does the medical code have a method to revive them? Xiao Mo hesitated for a moment. This is Hua Xia, not the 7-province continent. There are many techniques that we could use in the continent but can't use in Hua Xia. It was quite great already that they were able to maintain their abilities after coming to Hua Xia. If they wanted to revive someone, they could not do it with the spiritual energy that was still present in Hua Xia. You mean that you can't revive my mom and dad? What if we brought them to the 7-province continent? If you aren't afraid that their souls would disperse, you can try it. In other words, she couldn't revive them in Hua Xia. Also, their corpses had already decomposed a long time ago. Who knows how many years since they died? There's no way we could revive them, Xiao Mo continued. The reason Yun Luo Feng was able to revive Hong Luan earlier was that Hong Luan's corpse was perfectly preserved. Moreover, the spiritual energy in Hua Xia was way too faint. Even if they had the corpses, there was no absolutely safe way to revive them. Xiao Fenger, understanding dawned on the man. He shook his head and said, Dad and Mom are already satisfied that we were able to see you one last time and know that you are living happily before we leave. We don't have any other requests, so we can contently check in at Yama's hall. After people died, if their wishes were unfulfilled, they would linger in the mortal world. Now that their wish had been fulfilled, it was time for them to leave. However, I want to know. Who killed your mom and I? Who caused our family to separate? Looking at the man's dark expression, Yun Luo Feng replied, Yun Tianqi. When Yun Luo Feng was ready to leave, it was already quite late. Her body was very weak, as though all the energy had been sucked out of her. Yun Xiao tightly held onto her waist. Shower, believe in me. I will think of a method. Believe in me. Yun Luo Feng's expression shifted and she feebly smiled. In truth, I should have come to take a look when I first returned to Hua Xia so that my parents didn't need to wait one more year for me. However, this place is my childhood nightmare. If we weren't about to leave Hua Xia, perhaps I would never have come here. Then, I also wouldn't have known they have been searching for me all along and never left. When her parents were still alive, she was happy. She also grew up delicately under their protection. However, that night 20 years ago would be her nightmare for eternity. She was unable to forget the scene of that night even to this day. Chapter 2221, Another Story of Hua Xia, 62. I will find a solution. Yun Xiao lowered his head to lay a gentle kiss on Yun Luo Feng's lips with a smile. All right. All right. She believed in him. He would accomplish anything that he said. Yun Luo Feng tightly embraced Yun Xiao's waist. Capital Elementary. Yun Nianfeng was holding onto Yun Chutian and joyfully darting out of the school. However, he was running too fast and accidentally ran into someone, causing him to slam to a halt. Are you okay? Yun Nianfeng apologetically asked as he looked at a doll-like girl who fell to the ground. The little girl was very good-looking, but, compared to his Chutian, she was still lacking. Brat, you dared to bump into my daughter. Without waiting for the girl to say anything, a sumptuously dressed mother madly ran over and picked up the girl from the ground. She furiously glared at him. Who are your parents? Tell them to come out immediately. Nianfeng. Yun Chutian tugged on Yun Nianfeng's hand and gestured at the shouting mother with her eyes. Yun Nianfeng's eyes also swept over the mother's face, his fair and delicate face full of disdain. I already apologized, what else do you want? With a mother like you, your daughter is truly unfortunate. Tianer, let's go. He pulled onto Yun Chutian and wanted to leave. The mother suddenly flew into a rage and extended her hand, wanting to push Yun Nianfeng. But Yun Nianfeng dodged and accidentally extended his leg, causing the mother to immediately trip onto the ground and screech. Auntie, watch where you are walking, don't blame me for carelessly tripping. Yun Nianfeng pulled a face and ran off before the mother could recover. Mom. The little girl had no regard for her fallen mother. Her glistening eyes were intently watching Yun Nianfeng. That brother is really pretty. Shui Ye wants to be married to him. Since that child is so rude, his parents mustn't be anything good either. You mustn't be interested in a beggar child like him. The mother snorted and furiously stared at the direction that Yun Nianfeng departed. Her eyes darkened and she ordered, Uncle Li, look into this child's background. Also, escort Miss back, I have something else to do. Yes, madam, Uncle Li reverently responded. Outside the school grounds, Yun Nianfeng saw that there was no one chasing them and frowned. How were we so unlucky to be in the same elementary school as that woman's daughter? Brother, didn't mother already say that Yun Tianqi and Li Quiqui won't live for more than a few days? Let her jump around however she wants for a few more days. Yun Chudian beamed, revealing her cute little eye teeth. That was right, the people they ran into earlier were Li Quiqui and Yun Shuilian. Hearing this, Yun Nianfeng's smile grew bigger. We won't have to go to school in a few more days. I really hate staying with a group of brats. It's so boring. Hearing this, Yun Chudian rolled her eyes. You say that like you aren't a brat yourself. Let's go, Tianer, come home with brother. Yun Nianfeng held onto Yun Chudian's hand with a little backpack on his back and walked towards their home. Anyhow, they would be able to leave after enduring it for a few more days. He wondered how his mother's plan was progressing. Chapter 2222, Another Story of Hua Xia, 63. Inside the cafe, Lin Qing's eyes were filled with worry as she surveyed the people walking past every now and then. She bit her lips, and her face was somewhat pale. Suddenly, an urge to pee hit her, and she stood up to head to the restroom. She finally relaxed after reaching the restroom, but at that time, the restroom's door was heavily closed. Who's there? Lin Qing's expression dramatically changed, and she hurriedly turned around. She saw a woman standing in front of her with a scarf covering her face. Who are you? The woman quietly laughed. Who do you think I am? This voice was very familiar, so familiar that it caused Lin Qing's eyes to widen in surprise. She closely leaned against the sink behind her. What are you doing? Don't forget, your evidence is still with my friend. Li Quiqui snorted and pressed closer toward Lin Qing. I was truly stupid 5 years ago and was fooled by a little girl like you. I have already looked into it, and the evidence simply isn't with your friend, it was hidden by you all along. If you die, do you think anyone would see the evidence? Lin Qing trembled, fear filling her eyes. No. Suddenly, she drew up strength from somewhere unknown and slammed into Li Quiqui with a bang. She took advantage of Li Quiqui stumbling to flee the restroom. However, the restroom's door was utterly locked, and Lin Qing had nowhere to escape. Li Quiqui's brows knitted and her lips turned up with a smile. Try running. Today, you can't escape. I originally planned to spare you, but it was you who wanted to court death and threaten me. After saying this, Li Quiqui pulled out a knife. The sharp blade reflected in Lin Qing's eyes, making her pupils dilate. The fear of death pervaded her heart, causing her to shudder. She was extremely regretful inside. It would have been nice if she had not borrowed from loan sharks from the start. That way, she would not have listened to Li Quiqui and framed her teacher. Swish. Abruptly, the restroom's lights started madly flickering, the restroom becoming suddenly dark and then suddenly bright. Ah! Deeply frightened, Lin Qin screeched and forcefully slammed against the door. However, the door was locked from the outside, and there was no way to leave. What made Lin Qing want to faint though was that she could clearly hear people speaking outside. Hey, weird, is the door of the restroom broken? Why can't I open it? Let's find a waiter in a cafe, and have them find someone to come fix it. The tone of the two people outside the door was very normal, as though they could not hear someone slamming against the door inside. Lin Qing hastily screamed for help at the top of her lungs, help! Help! Perhaps her voice caused a reaction, it did make the two people outside pause their steps. Did you hear someone saying something? You must have heard wrong, right? Why do I feel like that's the sound of the wind? As the conversation drifted farther away, the footsteps also faded. Lin Qing's legs grew limp and she nearly fell on the ground. Why was it like this? She caused such a large commotion, but why didn't the people outside hear it? Could it be those people were sent here by this woman and purposefully ignored it? Lin Qing hastily turned to look at Li Qiqi but discovered her eyes were full of fear as well. What in the world is going on? Chapter 2223, Another Story of Hua Xia, 64. She originally wanted to quickly take care of Lin Qing and then leave, so she especially placed a restroom out of order sign outside. Yet, why did people come still? As if it were not enough that people came, Lin Qing had made such a ruckus but no one noticed it. This was too preposterous. Hey! Suddenly, a snort rang in the spacious restroom, causing Li Qiqi to jolt from fright. She frantically rubbed her shoulders and asked while biting her lips, "You are about to die, why are you laughing?" Lin Qing's eyes became more frightened. I didn't laugh. Didn't laugh. Besides you and me, could there possibly be someone else inside this restroom? Li Qiqi sneered. Wanting to scare her? Impossible. In any case, Lin Qing must die. Thinking to this point, Li Qiqi walked toward Lin Qing again and the knife in her hand slashed down. Hey! Another snort was heard next to Li Qiqi's ears. This time, she clearly saw Lin Qing's eyes squeezed shut from fear, and her mouth did not move the slightest. In other words, there was a third person in this restroom. Li Qiqi's hand shuddered, and she lost her hold on the knife slipping to the floor. Her face was ghastly pale, and her lips were trembling. Who's there? Who is it? At that moment, whether it was Lin Qing or Li Qiqi, they could feel that the bathroom air was extremely cold, and the lights were eerie in how they kept flicking on and off. Their hair stood on end. Fu tilde. A cold wind blew past, coincidentally right next to Li Qiqi's ears. Her mind finally crumbled, and she shrilly screamed. She promptly picked up the knife and turned around, slashing down. However, there was only air behind her and nothing else. Who's there? Who is pretending to be a ghost to deceive people? I, Li Qiqi, have never believed in the supernatural. Immediately show yourself. A figure in white floated past Li Qiqi, but it was too fast, causing Li Qiqi to stumble from fear and she nearly fell. Just who are you? Could it be that Li Qing knew she wanted to kill her, so she specially hired someone to frighten her? No, this woman couldn't be that smart. Drip, drip. The sound of water dripping stood out in the silent restroom, every drip echoing in their ears. Li Qiqi felt something wet dripping onto her head, and she hastily wiped it. With the help of the flickering lights, she saw red on her hands. Blood. Ah! This scene caused Li Qiqi to suffer from immense fright. She screeched, but when she wanted to look up, a headful of black hair suddenly cascaded down from the air above her, coming face to face with her. When Lin Qing saw this, she promptly fainted and limply laid on the floor. Li Qiqi also wanted to faint, but she was unable to. Shakily, she asked, "Are you a person or ghost?" Hey! The long-haired woman snorted. Her voice was eerie, giving people a chilly feeling. You don't remember me. The woman's skeletal hands pushed aside her long hair, and a bloody and ravaged face was unveiled. Her eyeballs were nearly falling out and hung loosely in their sockets, her mouth was cracked wide, and chilly laughter was coming out of her. Qiqi, I miss you a lot. You promised you would take care of my daughter. Why did you evict her? Every sentence was like a demand for her life. It also caused Li Qiqi's last straw of sanity to collapse, she completely crumbled. She wildly waved her knife with everything she had to chop the ravaged-looking woman. Every hit was like slashing through air, and the woman remained motionless in front of her, ominously smiling. Chapter 2224, Another Story of Hua Xia, 65. Li Qiqi, I died so tragically. Why wouldn't you spare me? Why wouldn't you spare my daughter? Under the flickering lights, the woman's face was sinister and terrifying. Her miserable voice sounded like it was coming from hell, causing Li Qiqi to tremble with fear. Miao Feng, spare me, I didn't do it on purpose. Blame Yun Tianqi, find him if you want someone. It's all his fault. That was right, it was all Yun Tianqi. If he hadn't coveted his older brother's wealth, then they would not have thought of this method to steal it. You both must die, must die. The woman's bloody face suddenly zoomed in. There was also a bloody hole in her chest with blood ceaselessly flowing out. Her hands were squeezing Li Quiqui's neck, and her expression was malevolent and frightening. Ah! Li Quiqui screamed and her eyes rolled to the back of her head, fainting. She had no idea what happened next. When she woke up, she was inside the mansion. She lifted her hand to rub her aching neck, suspicion flitting through her eyes. Was I dreaming? How could there be ghosts in this world? Anyway, if Miao Feng wanted to take revenge, she would have come a long time ago and would not have waited until now. Mom! The timid voice of a little girl came from the side. Li Quiqui slowly regained her senses and turned to look at the little girl wearing a princess dress and holding a doll. She frowned. Your dad hasn't returned yet. The little girl nodded. Uncle Police said Mom fainted in the restroom of a cafe, and they sent Mom home. I just called Dad. Dad said he was busy, so he didn't come back. Busy, busy, busy. I have no idea what he's busy with all day long. Li Quiqui furiously flung the pillow in her hand away. Her expression was malicious and frightening, evidently scaring the little girl. Mom, did you fight with someone outside? The little girl childishly asked with her large, innocent eyes. Li Quiqui was startled. What do you mean? Mom, your neck has handprints. The little girl pointed at her mother's neck with fear in her eyes. Li Quiqui's expression shifted. Hurry and bring me a mirror. Okay, the little girl obediently answered. She eagerly ran over to the makeup vanity set and retrieved a European makeup mirror, handing it to her mother. Through the mirror, Li Quiqui saw the bloody handprint on her neck and screamed, tossing the mirror away in a split second. Miao Feng. Miao Feng is really back. The previous scene was not a dream. Li Quiqui frantically picked up her cell phone and speedily dialed a number. However, no matter how the phone rang, the other end did not pick up. Shuilian, do you know where your dad went? Li Quiqui asked, biting her lips. The little girl shook her head. Dad didn't tell me. Tell the chauffeur to come. I need to make a trip to the company. Li Quiqui hastily climbed up from the bed and quickly draped a jacket over herself before walking out. Yun Pharmaceutical Corporation. Inside the office, the lights flashed. A man sat on an office chair and had a young girl sitting on his lap. Chairman, the employees have nearly all left, can we? Her fingers flitted across the man's chest and took off his clothes with great familiarity. A seductive smile was hanging on her lips. Chapter 2225, Another Story of Hua Xia, 66. The man's arm was closely looped around the good-looking girl's waist, and he kissed her. This is the office after all. If that old hag of mine happens to charge in, we will be caught red-handed. How about we open a room later? The girl chidingly pushed the man and titillatingly smiled. Chairman, didn't you say Madam was sick at home? Then there's no way she would come here. We haven't tried having fun in the office yet. Ha ha. Yun Tianqi chuckled and impatiently pulled the girl's dress back. Then we don't have to hold back. It's no big deal even if that old hag sees something. My Yun corporation is getting larger and larger, so she's not that useful anymore. After saying that, Yun Tianqi also took off his pants and charged in. However, a short while after he began, the office door was kicked open with a bang. Tianqi. Li Quiqui had just rushed in when the offending scene in the room clashed into her sight, causing her to be stunned still. Yun Tianqi did not expect Li Quiqui to charge in at a time like this. Panic flashed through his eyes. He hurriedly released the girl he was pressing down and anxiously explained, Quiqui, let me explain. Ah, Li Quiqui finally reacted and madly dashed toward the naked girl, her sharp nails mercilessly slashing her face. You bitch, you dare to seduce someone's man. I'm going to rip your face apart. Quiqui. Yun Tianqi shoved Li Quiqui away and protected the girl behind him. Don't be so impulsive, she's innocent. Innocent. Li Quiqui's widened her eyes. He actually said a vixen like her that seduced someone's man was innocent. Yun Tianqi, I treat you so well, and my Li family is also totally devoted to you, but what about you? Why would you treat me like this? Li Quiqui was livid with anger and mercilessly flung a slap on his face. No wonder you didn't touch me all that much this year. It's because of this vixen. Let me tell you, I absolutely won't spare you cheating too. A cold smile appeared on the girl being protected behind Yun Tianqi. Li Quiqui, serves you right. I didn't come to Yun Corporation in vain today. Not only will I steal your man, but I will also make you feel so much pain that you will wish you were dead. Enough. Yun Tianqi harshly shouted. Li Kuikui, don't think I'm afraid of you. Everything will be fine if you complacently be the madam of the Yun Corporation. Linda's appearance won't affect your position. But if you unreasonably cause trouble, I will divorce you. He originally wanted to explain himself, but this woman did not even take a look at herself. She was simply like a lunatic. He truly could not raise any interest for a lunatic like her. Li Kuikui was trembling as she furiously pointed at Yun Tianqi. You want to divorce me? He wants to divorce me for a woman like that. Yun Tianqi, don't forget how much hardship I suffered for you. You also took part in killing Yun Ling and Miao Feng back then. Shut up. Yun Tianqi hurriedly covered Li Kuikui's mouth, cold sweat streaming down his forehead. Although he was close to Linda, he was absolutely unwilling to let a third person know about things like this. However, Li Kuikui mustered up strength from somewhere and shoved Yun Tianqi's hand away. She snorted, afraid now. Unfortunately, it's useless even if you are. Me and Fang found us, ha ha ha. She is coming to pick us up. We won't be able to escape from death, yet you have the mood to protect this woman.